Buon pomeriggio.
Good afternoon and welcome to the second meeting organized by Club Degli Orafi together with Intesa Sanpaolo. Today we're going to talk about the US market. Is it going to change? As you all know, it is one of the most important markets for our industry. Is it going to change in the second Trump era? On Monday, Mr. Trump will officially become the President of the United States. And we're all looking forward to what is going to happen. The meeting is going to last about 45 minutes. Therefore, I will leave the floor directly to Mrs. Laura Biason, our wonderful director. Thank you very much, President. Thank you very much. Well, I would like to invite a person to join me here. I have the honor to present, for the first time, the director of the Houston ICE office, Mr. Filippo Fusaro. Welcome. It is an honor to have you here. As you all know very well, the ICE office in Houston is responsible for jewelry as well. Very briefly, since I want to leave as much time as possible to Mr. Fusaro, I would like to say that you have been there since 2001. Yes, I've worked in New York first, and then I've spent 4 years in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I've been working in Houston for 3 months. What do you do in Houston for jewelry companies? We organize our participation in fairs like the JCK, which will take place in June in Las Vegas, where we have 140 Italian companies in our hall. And there is still some space if you're interested in this. We make agreements with the large distribution chains to support companies and to promote Made in Italy products so that more and more people purchase Made in Italy products. So many companies are going to benefit from this campaign. Wonderful. So for the people who have not joined us yet and might be delayed, I would like to say that later on I will give you the floor again. Sure, we also have many free-of-cost services. Houston@ice.it is our email address. And you're here willing to answer questions, is that right? Yes, of course. Of course, I am here to answer all your questions. Great, thank you. I have come from Houston for this purpose. Thank you. But I still have to thank other people. Today, just like yesterday, we are celebrating again our 20 years of cooperation with Intesa Sanpaolo. 20 years that have produced 40 sector presentations, 8 surveys regarding the sentiment of entrepreneurs, and 4 focus activities. So thank you very much to Intesa Sanpaolo, specifically Federica Vitali and Fabio Manenti. Thank you. Thank you for giving us the possibility of celebrating this very important anniversary. We have been working together for 20 years because we know that strategies are important for entrepreneurs. But to have a strategy, you need information. And unless you got the right information in a changing world, you cannot make the right decisions. And the world is changing so fast. In the past, you had your time to make your decisions. But today, as Mr. Mattioli told us during the briefing, organized to prepare this meeting. I mean, in the past, the time horizon was 5 years. Now it is 5 months. How can you make a decision in 5 months when it involves thousands of employees? So data are so important. Data scientists are important. Data centers are important. Nothing is certain, but if you can make your decision based on the right data, then you most likely will make a better decision. Right, without further ado, since we got only 45 minutes, I do not want to talk all the time. I would like to leave the floor straight away to Daniela Corsini, Senior Economist, responsible for research on commodities for Intesa Sanpaolo. I'm very glad to have you here talking to us, because many people talk about the prices of raw materials as if they were Nostradamus or a magician. They tell you in 2025 the gold will be worth, and they give you the exact number. And they tell you everything and the contrary of everything. But Daniela has made an exceptional work. When she presented it during the briefing, which was a really emotional moment, she presented a scheme that includes all possible events. I mean, if you do not have the crystal ball to read how much gold will be worth in 2025, or you have to consider many different scenarios. And if things change, scenarios do change. So, Daniela, you have the floor. You can start with your precise overview.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation. Well, the live we world in is changing very rapidly after the COVID pandemics. We're always having new surprises. This year, Trump will be the surprises. So next year, we shall be defining a situation completely different from the one that I'm defining now. As you know, the world growth should be around 3%, with the US slowing down a bit. And in Europe, we're going to expect a greater growth for economy thanks to the EU generation investments. But this might change based on what the incoming US administration shall do. As to the policies that have been proposed during the electoral campaign that are not necessarily going to be implemented, as you may see, all the policies are going to create more inflation. It should be basically promote growth in the US, apart from the energy policies, which means, and then I will close with the macro references, the US central bank should change its policies, because with a growing economy, with a growing interest rates, and with a trend towards a greater inflation, perhaps the Fed might cut the interest rates less than expected. So we expect that Fed will only implement 2 exchange rate reduction with some 4% rate. And it could even have the interest rate cut only once. So the European Central Bank should cut by 1%, and that should happen in the first 6 months of the year. Which will have repercussions on the dollar. The dollar might remain strong. We expect 0.2, 0.3 against the euro, getting to parity. And Europe, the dollar is going to be greatest as soon as the new policies are announced by Trump to be shortly implemented. The impact on raw materials, as Mrs. Biason was saying, is going to be even more complicated, if any. Any policy shall have different impacts on different raw materials. Here, I'm referring to oil, gas, gold, platinum, and silver. I shall focus on metals, so you can slow down a bit because you have as much as 12 minutes. So looking at the different policies to be implemented by the Trump administration, there are going to be expansionary fiscal policies, reducing tax for corporations and individuals, increasing fiscal allowances so as to have a growth of gross domestic product, including also an increase for gold. With growing inflation, we should have a growing demand of gold. And you see that the red arrows are pointing to an increase as deriving from the fiscal policies. But as we're saying, fiscal policies are also increasing the interest rate and will strengthen the value of dollar, at least at the beginning. And given the negative correlation with the American dollar interest rates and raw materials, there's going to be a pressure on prices. So you see for gold, having a strong dollar and low interest rate is very negative. So perhaps dollar will see a decline because of high interest rates and the high value of dollar. As for the trade policies, we don't know exactly when the tariffs, when universal tariffs and especially tariffs against China will be implemented. This is why we should have a decline on prices. And for gold, we have a combined effect because we're going to have a lower income available in China, so lower purchase for gold in China. But on the other hand, we're going to have a greater demand of shelter goods and as protection. As for the regulation because of climate policies, well, the impact of the regulation, which is negative on the price of fuels, the climate policies is going to be probably abandoned. This fight against climate change is going to be abandoned. And this will have an increase in fossil fuels because we have greater consumption as against the expectations. As for gold, we're going to see an increase in the prices of the platinum. You know, the platinum and palladium play a very important role in the automotive industry because they are largely used. So relying more on the cars with internal combustion will probably bring about an increase of these two metals. As for foreign policy, this is a very important question mark, perhaps the most important critical point. If, as I think, there's going to be a negotiation undergoing in Ukraine, not a ceasefire, but perhaps a freezing of the conflict, then we're going to have a decline on commodities. We're going to, as for industrial metals, we should have a higher flow of metals, especially aluminium. As for gold, we should have lower concerns, so lower demand for shelter goods because, again, of this. As for the Middle Europe, despite the truce that has been signed in Palestine, we're going to have a big focus against Iran with greater tariffs, sanctions against Iran, growth flows and export of oil and gas. So an important pressure on the fossil fuels and gold, which will see will bring about an increase in price because of the great concerns and the search and the quest for shelter goods. Here, I wanted to point out that there's great change underway. So in different markets, we're going to have different impacts, one prevailing over the other. As for gold and silver, I believe that on the whole, there's going to be a greater role being played by interest rates and the value of the dollar, with a stabilization on the low level vis-a-vis present questions. So there's going to be very high anyway. As for platinum and palladium, and as for all the other materials of the same level, I think that we're going to have a growth in value over the next year. Now, looking in greater detail, let me highlight this specific case for gold. As you know, we've reached a new historic record after the record that was reached in the summer. We now have over $27 for gold during Halloween. This has been caused by the monetary policies that was adopted on the lower level, you see that interest rates were a range of 0%, and over less than 2 years, we got it to 5.5%, and only recently have we dropped it to 4.5%. As I was saying earlier on, the rates are going to lower down. They might be as low as 4%, but the expectations are led to the increase because, again, we thought that aggressive cuts would be implemented, but this is not going to be the case. We're never going to go back to zero. We're going to have high interest rates for long, and this might deflate the price of gold. But as you see in this chart, there's a strong correlation between these two lines. You see that the price of gold had a very good correlation till October. Then there's been this adjustment. This disalignation increased with growing risk in the Middle East. Indeed, the most serious attacks that have been followed by record price with gold. So basically, all what happens in the Middle East is going to very importantly on the price of gold. The third factor is that what central banks did. You see the purchase of gold in individual years by all central banks worldwide. You see that the situation in 2024 is going to be pretty much in line with 2023. On the right-hand side, you see the volumes that were purchased in gold. Just for you to understand, over the past 22 years, from 2020 to 2022, 5 million ounces have been bought, and from October 22 to 24, 10 million ounces have been bought. So incredible volumes of gold have been purchased, something that is totally unparalleled. The price of gold will depend on the action taken by central banks. I believe that with all sanctions, geopolitical risks, and the sanctions that are being levied by Europe and the US on third countries, and buying gold is probably a very good guarantee for such central banks in order to protect themselves from the risk of sanctions and unilateral actions from different countries. And this is why I believe that central banks shall go on buying gold. As for the demand for jewelry, which is very important, this has not been the main driver this year, but you see the price of gold has been deflated for high salary in China and for American salaries. Buying gold in China is still a very attractive option because they saw an incredible development of their economy in the 20s. The currency has been devalued. So now gold is very cost effective, is a very good choice despite all the uncertainties, and is going to remain as such. Now, coming to our forecast, we believe that this is going to be the range between with an average of $24.50. We're going to have a greater stabilization this year, and then the long-time trend are going to resume. The same is going to happen with silver. Silver is going to overperform gold, might be overperforming gold, and you see that up to $40 per ounce. As for platinum, we believe that is going to pick up again during the year. If we look at a long-term horizon, the growth is going to be very limited. As for palladium, we don't expect that it goes back to the level it got to in 2022. This is all on my side. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much, Daniela. This is very interesting, and you've made an analysis also of the convenience for a customer to buy an item in a precious metal. I mean, so far, we've always been saying, no, the price of jewelry is not that important. But really, if you attended the Alta Gamma meeting in November, and I can see that we got Cristina and Stefania, who were present at that meeting. Well, things have changed. The price is becoming important. It is a driver for the purchase of high jewelry and for luxury items in general. So we cannot keep the two things decoupled. Raw materials are something we cannot neglect considering when the price is made. So thank you very much for addressing also this aspect. So, uncertainty, but you have provided us with a clear table that can help us understand how things may be evolving. And now the floor to Stefania Trenti. I don't even need to introduce her. She's head of the Industry and Local Economy Research of Intesa Sanpaolo. So together with Stefania, we're going to see what is going to happen with the Trump 2 era. We have already experienced Trump 1. We might already have an idea. Some claim Mr. Trump is unpredictable. Nobody knows what he's going to do, so we can only hypothesize. And the fact that we have already experienced one mandate cannot really help us that much because God knows what he's going to do next. But with you, in this tumultuous moment, we would like to attempt some forecasts for the jewelry industry in the United States. Thank you very much, Laura. Just 2 minutes to express my own thanks. 20 years of cooperation, a cooperation that happened by chance 20 years ago. I was alone at that time. Now I have a wonderful team working with me. And it is really a cooperation, a collaboration, because we're experts in figures and statistics. Also because, as you may already know, we follow several industries. Daniela has illustrated a range of commodities, so we have a wide-ranging vision. But working together with you gives us the opportunity of understanding these figures, because it is one thing to read figures and another to understand the underlying dynamics, and the continuous comparison and exchange with actors in the field provide us with this opportunity, which is that of understanding an extremely complex world. So we've been working together for 20 years, and I have understood that jewelry truly is an item, it is an object, but it has so many facets that make it unique and extraordinary. Jewelry still has a very strong symbolic value. Buying a piece of jewelry is often connected with ceremonies, anniversaries. The unit value is so high that the psychological aspects are so important. And as Daniela told us, we cannot forget that jewelry is made of precious metals, precious gemstones. So jewelry has a value per se. It can be an investment. So it is investment, fashion and technology. It is a real challenge whenever we carry out our research. It is a challenge because this is one of the most complicated industries we have to work with. So thank you very much for your support. Well, then I would like to thank the Centro Studi of Club degli Orafi in Italia, Mr. Ungarelli, who always supports us in understanding complexities. And I would like to also thank President Villa and President Maria Cristina Scoccialupi. Right, let me start by saying that Made in Italy jewelry is very important. Made in Italy jewelry makes Italy the European platform of jewelry manufacturing. We have a leadership in terms of export at continental level. Little less than 50% if we look at the raw exports data. Most likely we should also add to this or what is exported from other venues. Ireland, for instance, does not have any specific manufacturing expertise, and we can hypothesize that the €1 billion export from Ireland are made up by Italian or made in Italy products. The same is true with France, with our relationship with the maisons of luxury in France. So we can say that Italy is the protagonist in this world in Europe and worldwide as well. In the last 10 years, there has been a significant change. So in these 20 years, we have been able to acquire some historical prospect, and we can claim that in the last few years, there has been a total change in the Italian jewelry industry, with the capability of conquering again important shares at international level. A change in the approach to the market, a change in manufacturing, all this has been very successful, especially in the United States. Let's go back to 30, 40 years ago. Well, at that time, Italy had an incredibly high market share, but that was a different world. There was no China, no India. Italy suffered from the competition of these emerging markets. But then things changed, and starting from the low in 2009, 7.3% of U.S. jewelry import. In 2023, the last year we have data for, we have soared to a share of 14%, ranking second in terms of suppliers to the North American countries after India and before France. But back again to the topic that many French products are made in Italy products sold via France. The US is a very important market. We have 14% share of the American market. And as far as the Italian jewelry is concerned, this market consists of 4 states. New York State, New York is our gate to the US, but also Texas is a very important state. And I'm very glad to hear that Licia has headquarters in Houston. And then California and Florida. So we're talking about 4 states that are characterized by a very high income compared to the other states in the United States. More or less, we can say that we're very strong in New York with a significant presence. And that's a gateway to the United States, as I was telling you before, also thanks to some physical presence, physical points of sale. So we tend to think about the United States, but we're actually talking about some specific states, the ones with the highest income.
Our provinces export to the US in a different way. Altogether, the US export or import correspond to 14%. This has been unchanged for a while, and it was always 14% of the Italian export goes to the US. But with provinces having a stronger vocation to export, Torino, for example, and this is going to be analyzed by Mrs. Mattioli, who's going to explain why Torino exports plays such a big role. We see we had a very good growth up until 2023. In 2024, we still have partial data, but we expect less of a well-performing year. In particular, we saw a decline during the summer months. The interpretation that we provide for that is somewhat connected to the high uncertainty linked to the electoral campaign. In 2024, the electoral campaign was held in the US. That played a very important role. And a word of warning, because what we see here is the import statement and the export statement from Italy, the import in the US, and the two set of data do not overlap for some technical reasons or for the different timing in the invoice and payment or in the invoice, we can not find any overlapping between the two sets of data. What we can see is that in the first 9 months of 2024, France exported its product to the US, suffering much less than we did from the elections, so much so that export grew by 30% toward the US. And this is the view as seen from the point of view of the US imports. Then we saw a decline in exports from Italy to the US during the summer months. And this is true especially for Vicenza, Valenza, and Torino, which are the provinces that, again, export more to the US. What happened most recently, especially over the last 3 months of the year, where consumption in the US usually get to the peak after Black Friday because of Christmas presents. Well, we don't have clear data. Perhaps Mrs. Mattioli will shed some light on that. As we work on the official statistics, we have some kind of delay. We always look at data that are always back behind, but we believe that the solution of the uncertainty might have caused an increase in our performance in terms of export to the US. As for tariffs, well, we know that tariffs are certainly important, an element of risk, because if tariffs are levied, that trade war might ensue. You always know when it starts, you never know when it ends. Past experience concerning, again, the past Trump presidency tells us that tariffs cause a decline in trust. It didn't cause a reduction in terms of imports, because at the time we exported a lot towards China, less so towards Europe. There were some problems with champagne, automotive, and other industries. But what the greatest reason of concern for the jewelry industry, which is not going to subject to any specific tariff, is connected to uncertainty, to the lowering down of trust, both of consumers and clients. In the case of trade war might ensue. In the case again of tariffs being raised and levied. The good thing that proves to be quite consistent, not knowing what is going to happen in terms of trade wars, is that all the policies that were anticipated during the electoral campaign make us think that economy is going to perform well. As a matter of fact, it could perform even too much with the consequences of levying tariffs, and consumption should also be pretty high, increasing the performance vis-à-vis previous years, and the market is still basically developing. The announcement that was made by Trump, whereby tax rates are going to be lowered, especially for the well-off, is certainly going to have positive repercussions on the jewelry in market. Which we know is always targeted to high-end consumers, to highly spending consumers, and Italian companies can certainly rely on that and draw benefit from it. This has been shown yesterday, showing that Italian companies are fully aware of the risks, and we asked this question to the businessmen of the Club Degli Orafi, of the Jewelers Club, and we see that there is a growing desire for reaction. Indeed, the business community is very alert. They are going to react with a different price policy, and they're probably going to look for new markets. So as, again, not to rely exceedingly on one single market, i.e. the US. Having said as much, I'm done, and I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you. Thank you. And now, Mrs. Licia Mattioli, who's a lawyer, but she's also a dame of work. She's also the CEO of Mattioli SPA, operating on the U.S. market. And this is why we decided to have her on board in this panel discussion. Indeed, reference was made to the diversification of strategies. We know that the companies might decide to change their export. The possibilities are so wide and diverse that, of course, making the decision might be very difficult. Mattioli comes from Torino, so her company is based in Torino, and Torino is the city that, or the province that exports as much as 50% of the Italian jewels to the US. 1TO. We have the 1AR, and 1TO was bought by the father of Licia when the Marchesi company was bought, an historic company in our country. Having said as much, and now in order for me to ask you a question, what is specific about the US market at the moment? Because earlier on we were talking during the briefing that changes are taking place ever faster, and you are a contract supplier, and or you're also manufacturing for your own brand, right? Well, let me thank you for having me. I'm going to refer to you about my own experience, so you should consider that is my own personal experience, the experience of my own company. Now, after what Stefania has shared with us, I want to tell you the following. So New York is very important, but Houston is also playing a very important role. With Texas, you might have more varied situation. Lehman Marcus is one of the most important department stores, and that is based in Houston. This is why Houston is playing such an important role, because basically we export much of our jewelry through Lehman Marcus. And this is why, again, imports are explained by this by Texas. Now, again, following the slides that Stefania shared with us, I want to refer to this relative volatility of the American market over the past 2 years. As you've seen, there has been peaks and troughs, especially troughs or slowdown in growth in the last 6 months. After COVID, after the pandemic, markets exploded everywhere, US included, because everybody had the revenge shopping. Everybody wanted to buy. Jewelry, of course, have always accounted for investments, because if you buy just a bag, you're not making an investment, it's just an expense. Of course, you can resell it, but, when you buy jewels made of gold and diamonds, and, it's gold that has a greater value than the small stones that might include it. But obviously, when you buy jewels, you know that you buy something which is made because it is an investment. So we had this revenge buying that led to an important growth in manufacturing in 2023, 2024.
In 2024, things start slowing down, and we can see that the orders show some sort of slackening due to the wars, the Russia-Ukraine war, then the other war in Palestine, 2 wars that could become world wars, so people are worried. The value of the metal is soaring. This is also important. It is true that shelter goods increase in value, but the cost of jewelry becomes much higher, and this has actually curbed the purchase of gold jewelry. Elections. Prior to the elections, I remember some American retailers telling us, if Trump wins, I'm going to win. I'm going to buy. Otherwise, if Trump does not win, you'll have to come back in 4 years, because they were afraid that democratic government would further slow down the economy. But Trump has won. So purchases have restarted in America, because also the most democratic people recognize that Trump supports the economy. And many economists are telling us that this is a tangible fact in the US. In other words, starting with a very strong American economy, this has led to an increase in sales in the post-election phase. So slowing down because of the geopolitical reasons, last but not least, the China situation. All big brands are suffering in China, with a few exceptions, because the Chinese have had an input from above, claiming that European products should not really be top of the list. So Chinese buyers buy in Japan. Japan has grown because many Chinese people buy in Japan Italian products. Strange dynamics. However, it is foreseen that also in China, directives will come from above stating that it is possible to support foreign brands to the advantage of the local economy. So mention has already been made of cutting rates. Back to America, the most recent news, dating back to Christmas, well, that was an excellent period for business. Starting from the new elections, November and December have been very positive months. So finally, this stagnating situation is changing, and there is more optimism. Right, if Valentine is successful, and Valentine in February is an important event in the US, and if the Chinese market improves, things are going to get better. So maybe not like 23 or 22, but we may be going back to a normal situation. Let's not forget that America has stocked up significantly. So you have big stocks. The market is not doing anything. Of course, you stop buying. This is also another cause of the lack of growth that we have seen. So, Laura, what I can tell you based on the direct experience of my company is that when you depend on one single market, that is not a positive situation. And even more so today, given the present uncertainty, you need to diversify. Of course, this is a problem for small companies. If I have a 20 million euro turnover, where do I go? And 20 million turnover is not much, but you can't be present on 5 markets if that is your turnover. So we need some sort of consolidation. Few large companies able to compete with large international groups, because what do these big groups do? They take our beautiful brands that are not growing here. They advertise. I'm oversimplifying this, but they're very good at marketing. And then from our low turnovers, they bring the brand to billions of turnover. And you know, we make a lot of effort. We try to produce excellence, and then in a few seconds, others capitalize on what we've done. This is true, and we have to realize that. So diversification is the theme. Monopoly is not a good thing, but also having one single customer is bad. So also small companies have to be active in this direction. So let me thank our 3 speakers that have been really, really punctual. We're perfectly on time. I would like to ask Filippo Fusaro to take the floor again. Well, are there any questions for the speakers? No. No questions for the speakers. So, Filippo Fusaro, is here with us and is willing to answer your questions. He is the new director of the ICE office in Houston. In Houston, we thought maybe because of NASA for astronauts' wives, but now we've heard why Houston was chosen. So I'm sure that you will be willing to answer questions individually. Thank you very much and enjoy the fair.